Welcome to another Wake Up Humans podcast, and we're coming to you today with a powerhouse female chiropractor woman, great spirit. And I was just telling her, it's one of those things. This is something I would want my daughters to specifically listen to because, I want to raise powerful women and give them, everything that they could possibly learn in life. But it's also not just going to be for women; it's for men to learn how to kick ass in life and be free. So let's welcome from Delray, Florida, Dr. Marilyn Shore. What's up, Marilyn?
All is good. It's another beautiful day. One thing we always say in the office is no matter what it's like outside, it's always sunny at Shore Chiropractic. Besides all this Ukrainian thing, I always have sunflowers in the office. And, it's what's inside of you, not what's outside of you. So,
yeah,
I always try to make it a great day. And one of the things which I did this morning is I do my meditation in the bathtub. You probably heard me say that before. I do the 49 breaths. And one of my affirmations is I'm happy, healthy, and terrific. And in the happy part, I go, I'm a happy person. My circumstances do not dictate my happiness. And it doesn't mean that I'm sometimes not angry, depressed, frustrated, blah, 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 but that I'm a happy person overall. And that's a choice that we all make and decide to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So where'd that come from? Like, where did you start implementing that and where did you learn that in your life?
Well, I think I was one of those people that came from a household that was the opposite. That was very negative and fear-based and victimhoody and living in the box. And my mother was, depressed and felt like a victim her whole life. And I wasn't very close to her because I felt like she'd sucked me into some black hole because she was dark and negative. And she was a beautiful person, don't get me wrong. She was very loving. But this was her dis-ease. I'm not going to call it a disease. This was her dis-ease that she never conquered. And so I think for me, I was always the opposite. I was rebellious toward her. I was just rebellious, and I wasn't like this person that would like jump off, although I have jumped off cliffs, but I wasn't like dangerous to myself doing things mostly that were stupid. I mean, I did some things, but I think most teenagers do. But I think as a result of that, subconsciously, I didn't really know. I didn't have any connection with a spiritual life at all. Zero. My family was not religious. They were Jewish, but they weren't religious at all. And so I don't even think they really believed in God. I don't even know if they ever thought about it, to tell you the truth. I don't even think it was a belief or not a belief. I just think it wasn't part of their upbringing, their life, even though they were Jewish and we went to services on high holy holidays, which at 11 years old, I stopped going. I said, this is hypocritical. I'm not going. This is crazy. And again, I know it was at 11 and never went again. And so, going through, teenagehood, and I, that I was, 18 during the whole hippie thing and the revolution. And why do you have to be like your parents? Like, just because they did it one way doesn't mean we have to also do it the same way. Like, it doesn't mean that it was right. And when I went to college and I went young, I had to get out of my house, and somehow I was able to graduate early, a year early. I never really had a senior year. I went to school in upstate New York, and it was crazy. Like, when I say crazy, this was in 1971. So I remember majoring in, I decided to go pre-med, which was ridiculous because I barely ever went to school. And I remember sitting in a chemistry class, and there were like 200 or 300 people in there. And I looked at the people in there and I went, do I want to spend the rest of my life with these pre-med people? And I was like, no, I'm out of here. So I let that go. And how I made it through school, I wouldn't go to class. I got incompletes in 6 out of 7 courses. I remember my first year, and somehow talked all my teachers into giving me another test, a paper. And then I got like all A's. It was really funny, except for one. And one of the courses I took was after a book. I don't know if you know it. A lot of women do, called Our Bodies, Ourselves. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but it was written during that period of time. And it was about women getting connected to their own bodies. And it had a lot to do with, GYNs, which were all male, and that, that hysterectomy means hysterical, that women were hysterical when they were emotional, and so on and so forth. And so I decided during that time, there was a lot about midwifery. And so I decided at that point that I was going to become a midwife. Because I did like the health, whatever healthcare field, which I didn't really understand very much. And so anyway, I dropped out of school, hitchhiked cross country, went to Europe, blah, 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 did this whole great journey in my life, which is rich with, experience. Amazing. I highly recommend that people, take a gap year or whatever and just fly before they have kids and responsibilities and things that hold them back. And then I went to NYU. I got my nursing degree so I could become a nurse midwife. That never happened. And that was where I became a nurse. And that was part of that journey too, because I never really wanted to be a nurse, but my first job was on an experimental chemotherapy floor at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And I think that was really the thing in my journey, which was predestined, I believe, where I saw things that just overwhelmed me, were horrifying. I felt like I was in a science fiction movie, and not a good one also, like a bad one. And I saw people mutilated. And this is like, you have to understand, this is not like judgment or people who go through chemotherapy and radiation, but you have to understand that chemotherapy is chemical warfare on your body. So you're going at war with your body, and radiation is the same thing. We hear about radiation like Chernobyl and things like this, and it does mutilate your body, and you take risks and you take chances, and the effects of that can be devastating and fatal. And I saw that over and over, and understand it was experimental. So in the guise of hope, they were like mutilating people, and every person, on that floor that I saw, which was not old people, they were between 16 and 65 because it was experimental. You can only can't experiment on old people. You just don't know what they're really passing from. They all died, every single one of them. And I probably held 40 or 50 people in my arms as they passed on the most horrific deaths. And, most people can't even say they've ever seen someone die. Maybe they've seen them dead once they're passing, but to actually watch people pass, at first it was like scary. And then it became almost like I'm learning something here. And I watched the transition that people go through. And I found it fascinating to see their spirits leave their body. And I could literally, in some people, see their spirits leave their body. And that was the beginning of me like getting the semi-big idea, but me not really understanding it, because I never been to a chiropractor. I didn't know anything about the principle. Innately I did, but I couldn't bring it to words. I couldn't, I really didn't understand it. And so I worked on that floor for over 2 years, 2.5 years. And then I worked several places. I would get jobs and quit them and go cross country and do crazy things. And then I was in the ER, I remember, at Lenox Hill Hospital. I was working there, which that was probably the one place I enjoyed working to a degree. Although I saw pretty awful things there too, like kids getting spinal taps for high fevers, and then like just, tying them down and traumatizing them and possibly introducing infections into their body. I just saw a lot of stuff. But I remember one day I was sitting at the station, behind the desk, and I just said I was going to become a chiropractor. And I think I've told this story before, but I'm sure there are people on here that haven't heard it. And I went, what? Because I had never been to a chiropractor. I didn't know any chiropractors. My parents never went to a chiropractor. They would never even think of going to a chiropractor. And it was like Field of Dreams. It was like a voice spoke to me, but it was not James Earl Jones speaking in that voice. And I followed that path. And when I went to Life, and I didn't even know it was a good school, I didn't have a recommendation. I only went because I was the last quarter where at that time you had to take 2 semesters of physics and organic chemistry to get into school. And I didn't have those. And it was the last quarter that they would accept 1 semester of chemistry and 1 of organic. And that's how I got to Life. Talking about like being guided indirectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember going there and like, I'd never been to the South before. I'd been to Florida, but there's a tunnel that goes straight from, Long Island straight to Boca Raton. And then you miss everything in between. And it was so weird to me, like hearing all these people with these Southern accents and talking really slowly. And I'm going, come on, speed it up. And but I remember hearing Sid, say, you never can get health from a pill, potion, or lotion. And I was like, oh my God, that's when like the light bulb really started going off. And I started getting the big idea of chiropractic. And even that, it was a journey because I was a little medical, and I'm sure Tammy can relate also because she's a nurse too. And you get sucked into that, but it just felt right. And so that was the beginning of my journey in chiropractic. So there you go.
Holy sugar. So there's a lot there, but first point I'll reference is how it's amazing. And like all my nurses that come in, they're absolutely amazing. And I know when I first met Tammy and then we were, people were like, that relationship's never going to work out. But then I brought her to DE and started introducing her to all you guys, and she'd go off and just ask 1,000 questions.
Right.
She was embedded in that medical world like you were, and you see it from the inside and they're like, this isn't right. 80%, if not more, is just not right. And they're my best patients in the office because they're like, I don't want to end up like all these people we're taking care of, and we don't like the way they're being treated. But I want to go back to, because all of this journey and these decisions that were made innately for you started when you were a little girl. And I feel like 11 years old was that pinnacle shift in you, which is a young girl, but it started even earlier.
It started earlier than that.
So my thing was that I'm thinking is, where did that seed, that initial, was it something you read, an individual in your life that was planting the opposite seeds of what you were living in your household?
I can't say exactly, but I think kids pick up on things. And I didn't know that my mom had a history. Things were secret back then, and I didn't know that she had this history of, before I was born, she had 2 so-called nervous breakdowns, and I'm sorry, Mom, if you don't want me to talk about this up there, but, that's the way it is. And she's passed, a while back, but I think innately I felt that from her, and the real pinnacle was my dad. He passed away. He died. It's ironically of leukemia, which was the main thing I used to see on that experimental chemotherapy floor when I was 8 years old. And we didn't know he was sick. Cancer back then, this was in 1962. And cancer back then, it was like this, it's like, I don't know if you ever saw a Woody Allen movie and they would go, he has cancer. They'd whisper it. And my father didn't know he had cancer. We didn't know. The only people that knew were my uncles, my aunt, and my aunts. That's it. And my mother sent us to sleepaway camp, big thing for Jewish kids, upstate New York. And my mom comes up in the middle of the summer. It wasn't visiting day. Like, why are you here? And she tells us our dad died. Okay. And she was dead and buried. Like, he was done. And we never went to the funeral, nothing. And, back then it's like you're trying to protect your kids. You're trying to protect your kids. You don't want to see them suffer. But of course, we know that that's the worst thing that you can ever do, to a child, is not have them, deal with this, not have them see it, not have them feel it, not have them go through the grief, whatever emotions they need to go through. And I remember, she brought up a care package, like candy, cookies, all this kind of thing. And I went back to my bunk like, wow, look what I got. Like it wasn't really real. And I think that was the pivot, because my mom was a very needy person, and my brother was very traumatized. And I was the youngest, but I was the cheerleader of the group. Come on, we can get through this. We're going to do this. And they were like total basket cases.
How old were you at this time?
8.
Shit.
8. Yeah. So I think, that, but I think that, I think we're born with a personality, certain personalities, just the way it is. I see my daughter, like I saw certain things in her when she was like born, and, we're the vessel. They have their own spirit. We all have our own spirit, and that's how it's guided throughout their life. I always think of myself like a pinball machine where they go back and forth and bounce around in there. And as long as they don't go outside the walls of the pinball machine. And so, that's when it all started. So, I internally I became tough, but I really wasn't tough. You know what I mean? I really wasn't tough. I kind of grew up really quickly. So it was all about being strong, looking good, blah, 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 so on and so forth.
You keep using the word spirit, and I'm thinking about your spirit as an 8-year-old child, and the other spirits around you that were going through the same experience, but on a different level. And obviously it's not an educated thing, because you were never educated for the most part on death, and you never went through it. Do you feel like, and you said that, you feel like everyone has their spiritual journey and their purpose. Do you feel like there's different levels of spirits that come into this existence?
I can't say for sure, because we're speaking from our educated mind saying that. But I do feel like in our journey that people have to come here to learn different things, And for me to judge somebody who goes through whatever addiction, or they may be, whatever, murderers, this kind of thing, that's not for me to judge whether their spirit's at a higher level than mine. For my educated mind, absolutely. There's this movie called Defending Your Life. Did you ever see it?
Defending Your Life?
Yes. It's a comedy. It's with Albert Brooks. It's hysterically funny, but very poignant. And what it's about, it's people who die and they have to go to this space in between heaven or hell. Judgment City, it's called, Judgment City. And they have to go before a judge to see whether they have to go back and do it again, or they can go on to the next phase of their journey spiritually, whatever that is. And it's a very funny movie, but it's a very poignant. And the people who had the most fear, if you had a lot of fear and you didn't overcome it, you got to go back and do it again. All right. And so maybe there are different levels, because there's an evolution in that. So if, you believe in reincarnation or whatever, until we get it. So that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I look at, I always joke and refer to you as like the gypsy, the free spirit, because I know your background with how you traveled and you just went hiking, and you were obviously just off partying and experiencing life, which is, it seems almost scary and harder for kids to do these days.
Absolutely.
But it's like, if you look at your story in the home you grew up in, and you saw things differently from the get-go, like innately. And then you go off and you become this nurse, and you end up in the pinnacle of the top cancer center in the world, basically Mount
Sinai.
One of them. Mount Sinai is like, I know people that come from all over the world to go there. There and like Sloan Kettering.
Yeah.
Those are like the top 2, right? And you end up just land on that floor. And then you never had experience with chiropractic, never talked to chiropractic. You're working in an ER, and you're like, I'm going to become a chiropractor. How does that happen? Like, you know, like, how do you explain that to someone that's listening to this, who's an educated mind, saying, wait a minute, how did the word even come to her mind? To me, it's almost like God had a plan for you, and all your experiences were leading you to the moment where now you're going to help bring people to an elevated state of healing, because you saw all the crap out there, and now you're going to connect people, and you're going to educate people, and you're going to come from a world of experience. It's like that. It's almost like that was all predestined for you. And
I believe that to be true. And right. I think, you know, most people that if they, there's always the if in there, if they let go and let God to a certain degree, even if it's in a moment in time, that they can move forward instead of being stuck, you know. In the
what does it mean to let go? When people say let go, what do they let go of? What's the let go part? Let go
of their ego mind, let go of their fear, let go of, you know, what they're used to, let go of their routine, just let go. And where you see that mostly is people that hit rock bottom, they have no choice but to let go. You know what I mean? You get to that point where, you know, when you see the drug addict on the street, whatever it is, when you see somebody in severe depression, some people rise up, some people don't. You know what I mean? Some people rise up, some people don't. Obviously, mine is not as critical as that, but something in me was always looking and searching. And it became, even before I became a chiropractor, even when I was a nurse, you know, it's like I had to have these breakthroughs because I had a lot of anger inside of me toward my upbringing. You know, I saw people with families and it was my choice not to be close to my mother. It was not her choice, but I couldn't because I felt like I would be sucked into her darkness, you know, and I couldn't even hug her. I mean, that's really sad when you can't even hug your own mother. And I'm sure there are people that can relate to this out here, because I do speak to my patients about this, you know, that they say the same thing, that they can't hug somebody in their family. And it's not because they were physically abused and not because they were, you know, with intention, emotionally abused. I was never abused by my family. I just couldn't get into that world with her. You know what I mean? I wouldn't join that world with her. So I don't know, you know.
I think, like you said, you weren't abused from your family, but it wasn't like it was a direct act. You know, sometimes people have, you know, what I find with a lot of patients, they have a direct act they can associate something through. But when it's that indirect act, it's almost like your mom didn't realize what you're doing. And it's like, who are we supposed to love in this world more than our mom? You know, exactly. And I guess our dad, but I think there's a mom energy there. And to be raised up in that mom energy, it's almost unfair for a young child. It's almost like you don't like it. And then you got the guilt of, I don't like my mom. And I kind of came up with this thing, because I went through this a lot with my father, was I love him. I love him. Right. I know I have to love him, and I had to choose to let go of my anger of the things I didn't like, and then say, okay, what can I learn from this experience to bring on to people? And then the gift is I'm able to see this in other people going through it. And now when they realize they're not doing this on purpose, but emotionally, here's what's probably happening to you. And then a light bulb goes off in their head. And this just happened to a guy that came in. He's a cop, and he's a tough dude, but he can't stop drinking, and he keeps going through this emotional roller coaster. It comes from his relationship with his father. We nailed it the other day, and the dude was crying in my arms. Mm-hmm. You know, it was awesome. But I think the gift was I was able to see it, because it was almost like my spirit connected on a different level in my own life. And that's exactly what's happened with you, obviously.
Right. So, you know, when I would realize this is how much anger, I mean, I use that word again. But there was that time where I did hate her. You know what I'm saying? Like I would just seethe, because I felt like I couldn't relate to her at all. I could. And I think part of it was I didn't want to become like her. You see what I mean too? Because I saw a lot of me in her also. You know what I mean? And she was a really good person. If you met her, you would love her. She was so kind and loving, but I was like her. I was like, when I got older in my 20s, like she would call, because she couldn't talk to anyone about it. She had agoraphobia, you know, like she had fear of everything. And she would talk to me like I was her sounding board. And I did not want to be her sounding board and her therapist. And it was like exhausting because she would use me, but never move forward with it. You know what I mean? So it was like a constant. And this went on until she developed dementia. And it's interesting because when she developed dementia, like bad, all her problems, all her physical ailments like disappeared.
She forgot about it.
She didn't know about it. Like when this was like, she was in her late 70s, you know, and, you know, she always had gastrointestinal problems and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying she was happy, but she was better than she was. But she needed 24-hour care. And that was the time that I could start like loving her again, you know? So it's kind of sad.
But it's beautiful that, you know, when you realize, you know, it's the journey. You know, you keep using the word journey, like she's part of that journey that helped mold the person that you become.
Right.
And now, you know, let's talk about your chiropractic journey, your office, your space. And, you know, you're a big speaker and you share at DE all the time, and just how your life experiences. And I've always loved the free spirit in you because, you know, I've learned a lot from like you and Paula, just, you know, finding that love button in myself and letting go and just experiencing more, just listening to you for years and years and years. How is this whole journey? Like, what's your chiropractic world? What are the principles you're teaching in your space now?
Well, I feel blessed because from working in the, you know, as a nurse, and not so much, they go, like people go, you're so lucky you were a nurse, you have so much knowledge. That wasn't it. That did not make me a better chiropractor. What made me a better chiropractor was realizing that medicine for chronic illness is a travesty and it doesn't work. So it really raised my bar in trusting of the power that made the body to heal the body. You know, I have a lot of faith in the power that made the body heals the body. And sometimes I look at young chiropractors and I love it because they're so like, yeah, you know, like chiropractor, the power that made the body heals the body. But honestly, they haven't gone through a lot of the journey of being tested yet, you know?
Yeah.
And you understand what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
You get children, you're tested. You know what I mean? You go through your own physical stuff, which I've gone through also. And how high is my bar before I run off to a medical doctor, before I get all the tests, before I, you know, do all this stuff to get a diagnosis, which to me are dangerous because when you get a diagnosis, you know, it's not truth. You're either subluxated, not subluxated. You're either in a state of dis-ease or a state of ease. And what's the difference? What label you put on it, except that you buy into it and you become it.
Right.
So because my bar was raised so high, when I'll give you an example, when I had Gracie, my daughter, and I was 40 years old when I got pregnant. I never saw a medical doctor while I was pregnant. And I didn't do anything. I wouldn't be around anybody that would say to me things like, well, you're 40, you're high risk. You may have a Down syndrome baby. I mean, all the crap that tells you. And now, you know, like if you're over 35, you're a geriatric patient now. You know that. If you're pregnant and you're 35, you're a geriatric. You have to go to a geriatric OBGYN. Jeez. That's the rule. Do you know in Florida? Oh, yeah, here you have to. That's like, they won't even see you if you're over 35 and you're pregnant.
Wow.
You have to go if you choose to go to a doctor. Yeah. So, I mean, we didn't have that back then, but I didn't go to a doctor because I said, well, millions of women have had babies for billions and millions of years, and I'm going to have one too. And she's coming out of this hole. She's not coming out of that hole. And I'm going to have her at home. And that's just the way it's going to be. And I had a few challenges in that pregnancy, but you take a chance with whatever you do in life. You go this road, you take a chance. You go that road, you take a chance. And when I was 7 months old, I had severe right lower quadrant pain, like to the point of.
You were 7 months pregnant?
7 months pregnant. You know, I'm going, you know, of course, my mind's like going into my, like, do I have an appendicitis? Do I have a ruptured ovarian cyst? You know, I know all this. And I said, nope. I said, I'm waiting this out. I'm taking the chance. I had this for 9 hours. I remember 9 hours of writhing pain. Didn't call anybody. And I just spoke to God and I said, this is my choice. This is my path. I'm not going. If I go there, they may do a C-section on me. I may have a premature baby with problems going on. I said, I'm not doing it. And the next day, I finally fell asleep and it was gone, So, and I have a lot, and you have a lot of experiences too, where, I had, very bad, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I just wrote it out and did the things I needed to do, trusted in Innate, and said, this was the biggest thing. If it's God's will that I die, that's God's will, but this is the path I'm taking, period.
Wow.
Because you go in that other system, you could die too.
As you're talking, one of the things that is just dropping in on my brain really is, a lot of times people look at chiropractors, like we're complete quacks, right? Like like everything, a lot of what you're saying, I know a woman could listen to this and be, what do you mean you didn't go to a doctor? What do you mean you had this pain? What do you mean? What do you mean? Because here's the deal. When you start studying chiropractic, which then you start learning about this word innate, and you start learning the philosophy, and then you start going to conferences and medical doctors get up there and tell you the horror stories of what's going on. And people get up and talk about the things that went wrong in the system, that when you go to medical school, they teach you how to hide that, or they teach you how just not to talk about it and how to bury it. And then when you become outside the box doctor, that you start hearing these stories about damage and things that happen. And then you learn from people like you that worked in the system. And I sit there and talk to my wife and I see what's going on inside those walls. I start to, I don't have that 100% trust in someone walking in with a white coat that the average person will, because I know a lot of stories and I could turn around and say something to him and he goes, oh shit, you're on to me. Okay, let's talk on a different level now. So when I've had medical things going on, I said, okay, let me go get a test done. And then we meet eye to eye. And I said, look, I'm not doing that, because he goes, well, I don't blame you. Well, how come he didn't say that to the 1,000 patients that came before? So I'm not a quack. It's just, I'm letting myself think and leave possibility open to, maybe it's not time for that medical intervention, because there's other ways to address this, because I've heard thousands of hours of people's life experience, which to me is research. And you've had thousands upon thousands of hours in that world that gave you, if we use the word faith, to say, I'm going to ride out this 9 hours and let my body innately deal with it, knowing in the back of your mind that if I have to, I will go to the hospital. But your past experience pulled you through that moment.
Oh, I didn't have going to the hospital in the back of my mind.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful.
I didn't. I think because I know what happens in those places, and people have to understand medical doctors are not healthcare providers, they're sickness care providers. And I wasn't a sick person. Right. And that's so, huge. Like I said, I didn't, when my daughter was born, I didn't keep a thermometer in my house. For what? Why do you keep a thermometer? So you can get terrified when you see your kid's temperature is 105?
The fear meter. We call it the fear meter.
The fear meter. So I didn't do any of that. And again, and she had some high fevers. I don't know what they were. In a certain way, I guess I was blessed that she didn't have anything, horrific. But at the same time, I would adjust her on a regular basis or check her. And, in our house, when you were sick, even growing older, you went to bed, you got adjusted, no TV, no this. It wasn't not like you get ice cream and you know what I mean? It's like you're rewarded for being sick.
No, you heal.
It's like, all right, this is a time to heal, rest and recover and heal.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that, helped me. But, I would get swayed sometimes, when I was in chiropractic school too. And, we didn't touch on this yet, but one of the things that I really didn't understand was the adjustment. And, I'd never been adjusted. It was so new to me. A lot of people, they came from families of chiropractors, or they went because, they'd been to a chiropractor and they had their miracle story. And here I was. And, people would criticize me that I had never been to a chiropractor before when I went to school. Like, what are you doing here?
Right.
Which was ridiculous. And so I didn't even know the right people to hang out. You know, it was a journey. And so one of the things is about adjusting. And I remember when I was in school, the big clubs were the Gonstead Club and the Motion Palpation Club. You know, I don't know, it changed all the time, you know, whatever. Sure. The in vogue.
What personalities were dominant at that time?
Right. Well, you know, the in vogue technique, you know, whatever it was. You know, biophysics happened like a year after I left. You know, there was so I went there as a young, well, you know, early on in school. And then I stopped going, and I would experiment with all these techniques, you know, like SOT, Thompson, because I didn't know what I didn't know what to do. So I remember I was going into student clinic, and I realized I have no idea what the spine feels like under my hands, because there were always the leg checks, the indicators, muscle testing, whatever it may be. I said, but I have no connection to the spine. I have none. So I made a decision that I was going to go back to motion palpation. And, you know, motion palpation has a bad rap because of the leaders, the magazine and the leaders of it. But, you know, I saw Dr. Gillet, like he was like amazing, you know, the founder of motion palpation. And I made this declaration that I could not do any other analysis until I could see in my mind's eye every single motion of every vertebral complex in the spine. So if I felt C1, C2, I had to feel it, like just know in lateral flexion and rotation, you know, what it was, where there was restriction, whatever you want to call it, where like there was a blockage to the life force from the brain coming through the brainstem, not allowing that to move through the body so they could heal, so people could heal from inside out. And I did this for like a year. I had no idea what I was feeling. I just, you know, it was like this experiment. And I said, I can't do anything else until I can see every movement in the spine and every motion in my mind's eye. And I did that. And it made a huge difference, because to me, whether you agree with my technique or not, I had the confidence. I mean, it took a lot longer than 2 years, but it came to the point where I had the confidence to know that I know where I was feeling the spine was the area that needed to be adjusted, and not just twisting it or pushing it, but the exact vector, like the exact, whether it's in lateral flexion, extension, blah, 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 that was going to move that way. And that I could post check that and see if it was clear right away after that. And that's what I do. And some mentors to me back then, like all the really good osseous adjusters were the motion palpation adjusters when I was in school. They like, people wanted to go to them. They were masters at moving the spine, and it wasn't like static palpation, you know, it was in motion. And then I took a seminar with Arnaud Bernier, who was like, you know, dance with the spine and make love to the spine. And he really did. Like, he was a master adjuster. I watched him and I said, I want to be like that, you know. Even Donnie Epstein, I've only met him like once or twice, but I remember, you know, because people think in network, it's like non-force.
Right.
But I saw him adjust a C2 from behind where it went like that. Yeah. And it moved, you know, like, wow. So I believe in getting the principles down first. You know what I mean? Like, you need to learn how to move a bone specifically. You know, I got to say this, like, 1 second. I wrote, when I had this thought flash about this, let me see if I can find that. Oh, okay. So when Arno did it, it was so uncalculated, but very specific, his adjustments. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I have to move this PRS. You see what I mean? Yeah. It was like bigger than that. So it became very powerful. And in that, you know, I just feel like my adjusting technique is very specific. And I know, which everybody should know as a chiropractor, that they're clear when they leave the office.
Right.
So.
Right. That's awesome. You're a powerhouse, you know, and I always go back to this, you know, you met Tammy. Tammy's a powerhouse. She's a strong woman. I got 5 kids, 4 of them are girls. And it's like, you know, as a dad, as parents, it's like, especially in this world, which is just different, but they're not victims of the world. You want them to come through life with as many experiences as possible, just knowing they're going to be our age someday. And what conversations are they going to have? So, I mean, I feel like you should be super proud of yourself as like that young little girl that was 11 years old that woke up and just said, yeah, no more. And just listening to that voice within, like, all right, I'm taking a year off and I'm traveling and I'm going to go just, going from wanting to be a midwife to like the nurse to changing different hospitals from the cancer place to the ER to, I'm going to be a chiropractor to now you've had an amazing life and you're not stopping. You keep doing amazing things. And, as a dad of daughters, it's like, you're one of those women that I point to my girls, when they're at DE that, listen to her, sit in the seat and listen, just listen quietly. And they pick things up. So I want to let you know, I really appreciate that. And this opportunity here, because things came out that I didn't know about, and this is like a stamp on your life that this will be in cyberspace forever, and I know all my daughters are going to listen to this and just, and I appreciate you being brave enough and strong enough to come through what you've come through and then to become literally a leader for people and to give people the other side of the story in life so they don't have to be victims. That's huge. That's huge. So let's finish up with this. I've had this idea of this thing that I've been kind of sharing with people is, people die, they put a tombstone and it's like RIP, blah, blah, blah. I don't like that. Like if you had, down the road of Del Rey and there's this billboard that we say, this is Marilyn. It could be a quote. It could be something. This is Marilyn. This is your message to the world that your daughter will drive by this on a regular basis and say, yes, Mom. What would that billboard say or look like?
So I just had an innate thought flash and it was, she had a great life and she made a difference.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, Marilyn, I love you. You know that. We have a great crew of people that are working together to just make mankind, womankind a better place. And I appreciate having you part of that tribe. So God bless you, girl. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Love you too.
Amen.
Thanks.